distracting thoughts, those busy thoughts that we looked at the beginning, begin to subside. They rise less frequently. And the mind begins to calm down. And what we find emerges is a feeling of peace and calm. There's no need to quantify it. For any experience of this you might have had, just enjoy. And for the last few minutes, within this peaceful, calm space, I invite you, if you like, to think one happy thought. Take your time. Just choose something. And just go there for a couple of minutes. Now I'll play the liberating prayer. O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, you who love all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness.
to dispel the darkness of my mind, and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you. May all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may Holy Dharma flourish forevermore.
So what was your happy thought, I wonder? How successful were you? As I might have mentioned to you before, the first time I did that, Karen Peter came to the men's centre and invited us. Excuse me, I've got an itchy nose. Karen Peter, who's the resident teacher of Vajra Light up in Vauxhall, is it? Anyway, North Jersey, he came and taught at Mental Centre, and he invited us to do the same. And I couldn't think of a happy thought. I couldn't, I was just, I don't know. It's interesting. I suppose my mind just went to work on it in a sort of, distracted way and a bit negative. So it was like I kept sort of running through an index card of possibilities and discarding them as not measuring up in some way. I was looking for some memory that was like an unalloyed happiness, and maybe something very long or something, whatever. Really pretty unsuccessful at it. I mean, successful in the sense that it really brought my attention to, the mind and the role of the mind in these things. That something that I would have thought when you said at the beginning, before we started meditation, we were going to do this, I was just like, well, great, And then he said it, and I was like, oh, nothing, I mean, I don't know what happened. Anyway, since then, I've done it quite a few times, on my own and in classes, and I've become a bit more proficient at it, actually. And I don't just go to the same old memory. My mind is like, like training with your dog to fetch a stick or something, or to sit or whatever. It's like, my mind's like, oh yeah, I know this. I've done this. And it took me this time to a place we used to go on vacation when I was a kid, Cornwall, which is in the far southwest of England, a beautiful county. And a particular morning when, with my mum and dad, we got up really early and went down to one of the beaches. And it was empty. And, I went there. I really, it was great to go back, great to visit. I could feel the wet sand, how cold it was, Well, we're in England anyway, but also it's early morning, the sun was just coming up. Just my feet on the wet sand. I remember my dad the one and only time I ever saw him in swimming trunks was that morning, and it was great. I was able to just go there, have a visit, and a nice little experience. I know I'm not just rambling. I am just rambling, but also there is a point. This month's courses are based on the CD. This month's classes are based on the CD, Meditations for a Clear Mind. And when you hear me rustling through the class, I'm going to be reading Gesler's words from the, this is the PDF printout, but if you buy the physical CD, if they're still available actually. Anyway, used to come with a booklet. Great booklet on these meditations for a clear mind. And this morning's teaching and meditation will be on the clarity of the mind. So right at the back, actually, Geshe says, Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, for anybody who might watch later who has to be new to this, new to our tradition, new to drop-in classes, the founder of our tradition. Geshe says, the real source of happiness is inner peace. So one of those statements that the more I practice, the more they resonate. The real source of happiness is inner peace. So the way I interpret that is that there are things in life that we think of as a source of happiness that aren't really. And this takes us, if you're familiar, to these places like movies or alcohol or food or something, which Geshe isn't disparaging. He's just saying we need to be careful that we don't expect too much from them. That if we go to these to things looking for real happiness, the experience we're all looking for, we're not going to find it. And one measure of that is it stops. Eventually, if we eat enough of the thing we like, we'll feel sick. I do that every Thanksgiving. My mother-in-law makes me, I don't like pumpkin pie, I never grew up with it. It's a real American thing. So my mother-in-law makes me mince pie, or mincemeat pie, as you say. I love that. And for Christmas, actually. And, I think every year I do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, this just mince pie, great, This pleasure will never run out. Not this time, So I take too big a slice at the beginning. I can, because it's all for me, if I want. And guess what? Every year I have to learn the lesson. Actually, the older I get, the less I can eat without becoming uncomfortable. But, there's a conviction in there somewhere. This is so tasty that this is essential happiness. Within the pie she somehow managed to concoct happiness. And in that spoonful is happiness. And what Geshe says in his books is, no, more often than not, this is just a change. In fact, a change of suffering. But it feels like happiness because the change is so dramatic. The sensation, the taste, the flavors from the minute before when I wasn't experiencing that. And I'm like, oh, here it is, in there. But of course, it's not in there. It's just, I'm responding. My mind is responding to tastes and flavors, So the real source of happiness is inner peace. That's that peace which we feel emerge a little, hopefully a lot for you in breathing meditation. And that doesn't have anything spiky on the end of it. There's no hangover, there's no stomachache. It's available all the time, and it's not qualified. It doesn't have a limit. A limit is really our mind's ability through training to be able to access it and to keep our mind there. So that's really what all our classes are about. All Buddha's teachings are about is accessing the thing we all seek, which is happiness, but looking for it and cultivating it in the right place. And I mean right in terms of it's where we'll find it. And what we're looking for is unending peace, isn't it? We're not looking for peace that stops and happiness that stops. And still we go on, no doubt. Hopefully not, but at Thanksgiving I'd probably take too big a piece of pie. But one day I won't. Maybe this year will be the one. Some of the teachers within our tradition have great analogies. Genla Dekion, who's the world spiritual director, or global, I forget what the term is. She says, if the hot tub is so fantastic, why do we ever get out of it? And I was speaking to Ken Mongden about this. He said, sorry, I just wrote the paper on the microphone, sorry about that. He said, Genla Champa, who teaches in our new temple in Arizona, says, if massages are so fantastic, why don't we have 5-hour massages? And there are loads of other examples. Why do I never eat the whole mincemeat pie? Because it's not true happiness. So Geshe-la begins in his teachings from the CD. Happiness and suffering depend on the mind. So I think that's already becoming apparent. And for those of you who come regularly and are on this, what actually they call on the CD, this journey of exploration, it's what we discover. The Buddha was right. Happiness and suffering depend on the mind. He says, in recent years, our understanding and control of the external world have increased considerably. And as a result, we have witnessed remarkable material progress. But there has not been a corresponding increase in human happiness. So I don't take that as a criticism of material progress in any way. When I see old photos of the way like my mum and dad grew up in industrial Scotland in the earlier part of the last century, and the stories of how their parents lived, it was tough. It was grim. My father's father died when my father was like 4 in a mining accident. And when we found that on the internet, what we saw was there were so many deaths in Scottish mines in like the early part of the 20th century. My mum's mum walked barefoot from Glasgow to Dundee, which is about, 80 miles, as a girl of 16 to get work. It was terrible, So overall, in countries certainly in the first world, but, other countries as well, the people's material circumstances has improved tremendously. But I think the point is, why aren't we then ecstatic? If you think of how many people lived, you could go on and on about the circumstances people lived in the countries, in the United States, in, Western Europe, etc. Then we, compared to our forebears, should be ecstatic if the change in our mental circumstances kept up pace overall with our material circumstances. If you'd have shown one of my grandparents the life I've led, they'd have said, why would that boy ever be unhappy? How could he ever be unhappy? And I'm sure people, in impoverished parts of the world, of which there are many, when they imagine, contemplate the lives of people in the first world, then it's like, oh, they must be happy all the time. And we imagine that people in impoverished parts of the world are miserable all the time. And yet it doesn't work like that. I lived in the Philippines for nearly 3 years. I did not want to be a Filipino, the average Filipino, by any means. But I would say that I wasn't in a country of unending misery, wailing and sobbing day in, day out, by any means, It was a troubled place with a lot of issues. But no, it doesn't work like that. Geshe says, this shows that the cause of happiness and the solution to our problems do not lie in knowledge or control of the external world. So, great. Our external circumstances, fine. But as I often say, the problems begin in a sense when we look at our circumstances and we ask them to do a job for us, which they can't do. Because it's not the job of our external circumstances, ultimately, to bring us happiness. Happiness lies within. And in fact, when our mind is in a positive place, which we can take it to with practice, those external circumstances become actually much more enjoyable. And I'm speaking about food, pies, vacations, cars, because our relationship with our circumstances becomes much more relaxed. It doesn't have that grasping of please, just bring me unending, freedom from anxiety, freedom from distraction, Instead, we know them for what they are, and we enjoy them for what they are, and we're less inclined to overeat, and we're less inclined to suffer when, as they always will, when problems arise with them. with our possessions, with our house, with our job, etc. We're much more flexible, because where we're coming from is actually that place that we used to think they promised to take us. They never did promise to take us. We assumed they would take us there. We're actually now engaging with them from a place where we've taken ourselves, really, with Buddha's help and Buddha's blessings and Buddha's teachings. And these wonderful, wonderful teachings from Geshe-la. As Gen Longden says, it's actually just a question of hoisting the sail and let the teachings and the blessings carry us with an open mind and enjoying it. Geshe-la continues, so the real source of happiness is inner peace. If our mind is peaceful, we will be happy all the time, regardless of external conditions. But if it's disturbed or troubled in any way, we will never be happy, no matter how good our external conditions may be. External conditions can make us happy only if our mind is peaceful. So there's no direct correlation between a problem and a feeling. Okay? So it's not like turning a switch, like volume. Yeah, that's a good one. It's like you turn the switch a bit, the volume goes up a bit. You turn it more, the volume increases. And there are numbers on that dial. And there is a direct correlation between where the marker on the dial is and the number and the volume we hear. There's no direct correlation between a problem and the feeling. What I mean is, when our mower breaks, we're not going to experience a feeling of frustration that is objectively inevitable. Like, there's not a feeling like volume on a dial that corresponds to a broken mower. It depends. Now, we take this for granted, but it's, for me, this is one I have to keep reminding myself, and the more I realize it, it actually really, it's a joyful thing, actually. We know it anyway. If we know it's an old mower, and we were going to move it on, and we've ordered another one, and it's going to arrive the next day, a brand new one. How do we feel about it when the mower sputters out? Or how do we feel about the mower breaking when we've just heard some good news? Not the same as if we don't have a lot of money, or we've had an argument with somebody, or we've got a headache, etc., etc., and the mower gives up. Now, if you think about the headache, or you think about the financial situation or the good news, again, you could say, oh, well, that's the reason. And this is what we do. You're like, well, yeah, but the reason I wasn't so upset is because I've got another month. No, again, we can take this analysis and do the same thing again and think about it. That other mower arriving is not per se the source of our relative suffering as compared to like the extreme frustration and the rage. again, it's our engagement with the process. It's how our mind is responding. The same with the headache. How bad is a headache? It's an experience that's happening in the mind, as is the breaking down of the mower. It doesn't mean it's not broken down. And I'm not saying you can choose to have or not have a headache. And by all means, do something about both. But let's really try and mix our minds with this fact that in the end, it's all taking place in the mind. Without a mind, no broken mower. Without a mind, no headache. So, if that's where it's taking place, let's do something about it, because it means that that place is where we'll find what we're looking for, really, which is not a mower that never breaks down. That's a search that will always end in defeat. It's not a life without headaches or worries. That can't happen. And I had an auntie who'd never had a headache, my Auntie Lily. And she was not the happiest of people anyway. No, it's happening in here. This is the place where we need to do a bit of exploring, and we need to start engaging. So what is the mind? What is its nature? Geshe says most people, when asked what the mind is, will probably point to their heads and say that it is the brain. But that's not correct. The mind is principally located in the region of the heart channel wheel, or heart chakra, at the very center of the chest. The nature of the mind is clarity. This means that it is empty, like clear space, and that it is a formless continuum, completely lacking shape and color, that possesses the actual power to perceive, understand, and remember objects. So, the nature of the mind is clarity. It's not nothingness. Okay, it's clarity. And it's where the appearances of the world take place. It's where our experience of the world takes place. You can see the connection with our experience in breathing meditation. That peace and calm, that feeling of just things settling, things opening up, perhaps, the clutching of anxiety beginning to go. What replaces it is actually this a feeling of space. That's the mind, when all the clutter has subsided. And the mind possesses the actual power to perceive, understand, and remember objects. So it's where the world happens for us. In his introduction, Geshe continues, the meditations on this CD will help you understand the location, nature, and function of your mind through direct experience. Through learning how your mind works, you will be able to use that understanding to bring your mind under control, and in this way improve the quality of your life, both now and in the future. Of all the teachings and different recordings I have of within our tradition, which Geshe-la has kindly given us, that CD is the one I use most for meditation. I don't know if it's brought me more than anything else, but it's the one I go to the most, especially if I'm busy. And I think that has been my way into so much else. In my understanding of Dharma and my understanding of my experience of life. It really has brought me so much in terms of an ability to observe my mind at work and notice habits, and to find that what I thought was innate, like a problem being innately challenging, that these practices, these meditations for a clear mind have made it evident to me that those problems were not per se innately, inherently worrying and disturbing, that my mind was involved, actually, that my mind was completely involved in the circumstance, in the event of the thing that happened outside, the problem, and then presenting it to me almost like a trickster, a con man, and saying, look how bad it is. And for all my life, until I encountered Dharma, I was tricked by this into believing that was the case. Not into, the trick isn't that there's the mower's broken when it hasn't. No, I mean in the representation of it, my panic, my anxiety, my anger, or whatever, representing a circumstance to me as being one which I had to freak out at. That any other response wasn't valid. That in fact, if I gave any other response, I would be in trouble because I wasn't managing my life correctly. That if I kept myself, a friend of mine's wife said she has her mental bags packed for bereavement all the time. Since she lost her father, she's constantly ready for the next phone call. And that's the way I lived a lot of my life. I think a lot of us do, was half prepared all the time for things which I was ready to get upset about, and things happen. But I didn't have to get upset, or I didn't have to get as upset even as I would get. And I thought I had to. I thought it was almost a way of averting even worse calamity, was by saying to myself and to fate, look, I'm responding here. And of course it's nonsense. It's nonsense. What you find with people who are adept at these practices, long-term practitioners of Kadampa Buddhism, they're actually much better equipped to deal with the events, good and bad, or sorry, bad and good, They don't freak out either when the good stuff happens. They're able to enjoy them but keep on an even keel. They're able to think more rationally about solutions when it's a challenging event, Me, like that, just ready to respond to insult or whatever. It's a miserable existence. It really is, I was miserable all the time, but, so much of the time I was nowhere near as happy as I might have been, and a lot of the time I was miserable, and I look back on it and I think, it's not that about it, it didn't have to be like that. So today we're speaking about the clarity of the mind. Geshe says, think of your mind as being like the sky, vast and unobstructed, and all your thoughts and mental busyness as being like clouds. So, busyness also is a relative thing. This is something else we can find when we contemplate the mind, that we think there is an absolute in terms of chores and things to do. But probably if you're experienced now, if you've got a year or two or whatever of these kinds of meditations, or actually all meditation, all meditation, experience of any meditation under your belt, what you'll find is meditation expands time. It's not measurable on a clock, but our experience of time, mine anyway, and I've spoken to other people about it, it's funny, but when we're busy, when there's a lot on our plate, the last thing we want to do is meditate. It's like, I do not have time for this. When things are calmer, when I've got all my ducks in a row, then I'll do a bit of meditation. I'm as guilty as anyone of that. I'll still do it, even though I've learned, how many times. I still have to watch myself with that, because what you find is that when you meditate, and especially this meditation on the clarity of the mind, when you get up from your meditation, it's all a lot calmer. You don't feel anywhere near as rushed. I don't. It doesn't change the number of things to do, but the number of things to do feels more manageable. Can feel a lot more manageable. I made a note here. Yeah, it can feel as though meditation creates time. What it is, of course, is those distracting thoughts subsiding and having an experience for 5 or 10 minutes, or even longer, perhaps, of space. Infinite space, unbounded. The blue sky above the clouds, as we often say for breathing meditation. It's like you've gone up above the clouds, and it's like, oh. And so much of that busyness, that feeling of hectic circumstances, comes from the distraction itself, not the to-do list. Without all the distracting thoughts arising, the distracting thoughts like you haven't done as many of the things on the to-do list as you should have done. That in itself is creating more to-dos. I need to get around to doing my to-do list, and it compounds. And this tendency within us, it doesn't have a limit. It will just keep going and keep firing. But when we sit down and meditate, it's like, oh, okay. When you go back to your list, it never looks quite as long. So this is the meditation that we'll be doing later. We've got a bit of time yet. There's just so many things I want to say here. It's beautiful. Geshe says an important technique to develop in this meditation is simply to watch your thoughts without following them. You may need to practice this many times to become proficient at it. If you do this, gradually your distracting thoughts will disappear. They arose from the clarity of your mind, and if you just watch them dispassionately, they will simply dissolve back into the clarity of your mind. It is this clarity that is your object of meditation. Focus on this experience and enjoy the inner peace it evokes for the remainder of the meditation session. So, once again, it's not nothingness. The mind is an infinite expanse of clarity. When you're doing the meditation, be patient with yourself. Be patient with the process. Be patient with your idea of clarity. The clarity of the mind can take time to emerge. Often we only get little tastes and glimpses. But whatever it is, just enjoy it. The act of meditation itself, of trying, of sitting down and giving it a go with a light heart and patience with yourself, will bring all sorts of benefits in the future. So really, there's no such thing as a bad meditation or a bad meditator. If you show up, you give it a go, and you have your mind on a virtuous object, it will bring rewards. And patience is one of the rewards. I've learned a lot of patience with meditation, that it wasn't going to be what I thought it was going to be when I started, that it can be a process of years, in the practice, but the benefits begin straight away. And by a virtuous object, this is something I spoke about in the half-day course on Saturday, just gone, means good fortune, actually. It means an object, like simply the clarity of the mind, or on compassion, love, that is conducive to our happiness. That's a virtuous object. So engaging with a virtuous object, with an open mind and patience, will bring, and has brought you already many rewards. And that's you that's done that, with Buddha's blessings. Before we go on to the meditation, I just wanted to say, to read some of Geshe's concluding thoughts on this, in case you were thinking this is maybe like a neutral exercise. He's speaking about motivation and dedication, and he says, since cherishing others is the best method to solve our own and others' problems, the best motivation for any action is to do it for the sake of others. Cherishing others is the supreme protection from suffering and problems, and it enables us to remain calm and peaceful all the time. So, when we meditate, it's always good to begin by developing a sincere wish to benefit others through our meditation practice. The this is something Gen Wangan always says, or usually says anyway, I think. To remind ourselves at the beginning of meditation why we're meditating. This is for the benefit of ourselves and all living beings. When I try to think, you probably have your own techniques to engage with that feeling of others and their well-being, is to think, this meditation will make me a little bit more of a more patient person, a little bit more pleasant to be around for friends and family, or people in stores or something, by doing this for myself, by mixing my mind with a virtuous object, it's going to have a knock-on effect in the lives of others, and we all benefit. And this is why I'm sitting down to do this. Perhaps you have your, as I said, your own hooks to just stimulate that connection, to make those connections with everyone, with all beings. But if you like it, beginning with friends and family, And at the end, we dedicate. At the end of meditation, we dedicate. And what we do is we dedicate our merit. This again is connecting our practice with others. Our merit is the positive energy that we've experienced in meditation. And this is something we'll experience, in a few minutes together. The group of us are together in this practice. It might be on Zoom, but that's fine. It's just a tool. We were allowed to think of ourselves as together, and if we do, we'll experience ourselves as together. Why? Because the mind can do that. It can take me to Cornwall and holidays when I was a kid, and it can bring us together and remind us that we are so interconnected. In fact, that's just reminded me. This was a couple of things I read in an article at the weekend, and I haven't forgotten. This is to do with dedicating our merit, our positive energy, to the well-being and the happiness of all living beings. But this is to do with this interconnectedness that I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about spiritual interconnectedness, but I thought what I read in this article really brought home, into science and physics also, our interconnectedness. Where does one stop and the other begin? I don't believe it does. In the article it said, in fact, right now, if you take a deep breath and then exhale, by the time a year goes by, approximately one atom from that breath will wind up in every other person on Earth's lungs at any moment in time. In other words, you probably have approximately one atom from Caesar's last breath in your lungs right now. Sorry if it could be that everybody's aware of this one, and I'm the one who isn't, but I'm going to read it again anyway. Maybe you'd forgotten this, I don't know. And the next quote was, at an atomic level, we're all incredibly, deeply connected. Inside your body right now are hundreds of billions of atoms that were once inside each other human being on Earth. Throughout the generations and the eons, those same atoms continue to make up everything. The atoms of the dinosaurs, the plants, the trilobites, and even the single-celled organisms that once dominated our planet are now inside you. And the writer concluded, it's your turn now. Make the most of it. which is what we're doing this morning, isn't it? We're taking an hour and a half and trying to make the most of our circumstance as a human being on this interconnected earth, to make the most of our opportunity to give meaning to our life and find the happiness that we've always been looking for. And if we're finding it with these practices, find even more, because there's no limit. I could say a lot more. I had a bit to say about distraction, but maybe that's for another day. What I would do is remind you, before we begin our meditation, that distraction is an obstacle. It's a major obstacle to our practice and our development in meditation, but we can do something about it if we're patient and we give it a go. So let's give it a go.